Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, um, Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu visited Hungary this week. A very long visit, 4-day visit, which is surprising in the middle of a war,
Yeah,
middle
well,
of
I think he
political
wanted to get out of
crisis.
Dodge. I think he wanted to get out of Dodge for a little
Yeah,
while.
yeah, that's what 4 days, and then on Monday he's going to the United States, so he's spending a lot of time outside Israel. But what was kind of interesting, of course, was that he came at the invitation of Viktor Orbán himself, and Viktor Orbán had extended that invitation in November of last year, when at the time when the ICC had issued its arrest warrant against Netanyahu, and he extended the invitation clearly with the intent of demonstrating to Netanyahu that he, Viktor Orbán, would have no intention of arresting him upon his arrival in Hungary. So Netanyahu, of course, accepted the invitation,
While
and then
while, while being a member of the ICC.
Hungary is a member of the ICC, and Israel, of course, is not. And Hungary announced on the day that Netanyahu arrived that he was withdrawing from the ICC. That presented its papers, and it's begun the entire process of withdrawal from the ICC. Naturally, Netanyahu thanked Orbán. Now, we of course have a utterly low opinion of the ICC. It has no legal basis. It has no legal foundation, has no affiliation with the United Nations. It's entirely a made-up institution created by the Western powers at this glory moment of the 1990s, when the unipolar moment, when it suddenly thought that, hey, we can use lawfare and wage it against the rest of the world. Now, what is kind of interesting was that, of course, Orbán came under some attack from the Human Rights Brigade, which is what one would have expected. But he also came under attack from some European leaders. And that is kind of interesting, because many European leaders had themselves made clear that they would not arrest Netanyahu should he arrive. One of those leaders was indeed Annalena Baerbock. And we can take a look at what Annalena Baerbock had to say.
Do we really?
Do we
Do we
really?
really have to?
Not really.
Yeah, well, she's almost gone, so.
Yes, but she seems to be hanging around, determined
Yeah. Yeah.
to stay, squeeze a little bit more out of that
But
job.
she was just recently in Kiev again. Yeah.
Yes, 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 yeah, yes, she was. Um, and here's the headline. This is an AFP story. German foreign minister says Netanyahu's visit to Hungary is, quote, bad day, unquote, for international law. And she says here that she decries the visit by Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Hungary, despite an ICC arrest warrant. And she says this is a bad day for international criminal law. She said this at a meeting of NATO foreign ministers in Brussels. Again, there's always some NATO's foreign ministers in Brussels.
There's
Um,
always there's some meeting going on in Brussels.
exactly. But the strange thing was that when the ICC warrant was issued, which was back in November, that's not quite what Annalena said. Here's the Reuters headline: Berlin to study ICC warrants. No more steps until Israeli visit planned. And here we have the German government will carefully examine the ICC's arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense chief, but will not take further steps until a visit to Germany is planned, a spokesperson said. I
That's a
find it
very different tone, very
very
different
different.
approach.
Yes,
Again, what is the value of this podcast? George did a deep dive. What did she say then? What is she saying now?
that's
Of
right.
course, she's a nitwit.
That's
Okay.
right. Yes. And then here says the German government spokesman, Stefan Heberstreit. I find it hard to imagine that we would make arrests on this basis. So this is a person speaking on behalf of the German government.
Either you do or you don't. Okay, everybody. It's you can't be a little bit pregnant here. Okay, either you adhere to it or you don't. So
Exactly.
stop the babble.
That's right. That's right. And then he did not specify what those questions entailed and did not answer when asked whether Netanyahu would be welcome in Germany. The German government's position on weapons deliveries to Israel has not changed following the arrest warrants and are still subject to case-by-case assessments. So basically, they're delivering weapons. The member of the ICC, and they're going to study the arrest warrant. And then German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said on the sidelines of the COP29 climate summit in Baku that Germany respected the ICC's work and adhered to the law at national, European, and international levels.
Everybody, I asked George, do we really have to do this? Here we go. This is why I say that. We'll have to study it. Okay.
That's right. And then she's now being quoted here. Whether the Israeli prime minister will enter the European Union is a hypothetical question. But we are now examining exactly how we will deal with it. So not only are we examining it, but we're examining exactly how we will deal with it.
I suppose that process is still going on.
It's still going on. Study. We need to study. Netanyahu was last in Germany in March 2023, and no visits are currently planned between the two countries. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel declared that Israel's security is a core part of Germany's modern political existence, or raison d'etat, in taking responsibility for Nazi Germany's role in the murder of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. They always say this, but of course, the problem with that is that why should the Palestinians have to suffer for what Germany did during the 1940s? I mean, that was always, okay, you did this, fine, but why are you making the Palestinians suffer for that?
Exactly. One could easily make, and it would even be a better case, in my opinion, is that Germany, part of its historical legacy is to take ownership of a genocide that was committed by Germany and its satellites in the 1940s. And because of that, it cannot be part of any other genocide against any people ever again. That's a better case. It's a smarter case, historically grounded and legally grounded.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And then we have, since Hamas's attack on October the 7th, Chancellor Olaf Scholz has also cited Germany's historical responsibility for what he sees as his special support of Israel.
Why can't it be a special support against genocide?
No, they never do that. But you know, they bankrolled the state of Israel really from the beginning. They were transferring a lot of money to Israel. The German government was involved in the drafting of the ICC statute and is one of the biggest supporters of the ICC. This attitude is also the result of German history, says Heberstreit.
Yeah, but there's an exception clause here.
There's always an exception. At the same time, it is a consequence of German history that we share unique relations and a great responsibility with Israel. But again, because they've been bankrolling Israel, really throughout Israel's history, they've been essentially really forcing immense suffering on the Palestinians, because not only the mass immigration of Jews into Palestine was caused by German policies in the 1930s and 40s, but then subsequently the bankrolling of Israel was another gift by the Germans to the Palestinians. So Germany should have some responsibility for the Palestinians.
Yeah, but what is Germany's responsibility with Israel?
None. I mean,
a pure cynic would say, Well, this is what the Germans wanted. Get rid of the Jews, make them go to Palestine.
Right. Well, that's right. But the thing there is, of course, is that the Germans have not paid any compensation to individual Jews or Jewish families or anyone else. The money that they've paid has been to Israel. It's been to the state of Israel. It's not been to any, compensation to individual families. It's always been compensation.
Well, there was the
to Israel.
case of forced labor in Eastern Europe, where if you that there was compensation for that.
It
I
was
actually
the
knew
forced, yeah,
people
the
that worked
forced
on it.
labor in Eastern Europe, yeah, but that was only that was just this one specific thing, the forced labor,
Right.
but
That's
not
why
but
when
not for anything they did in the Holocaust.
I'm just trying to refine the point. Exactly.
Right, exactly. Um, and then Friedrich Merz, the incoming German chancellor, says he will find a way for Netanyahu to visit Germany without being arrested.
Come on, George. Is this the Babylon Bee? I mean, either you adhere to the ICC or you don't.
No,
I'm sorry. Don't play games with us here.
it's it,
This is such fraudulent thinking. We'll find a way.
we'll find a way. And then he says, Germany's likely next chancellor, Friedrich Merz, said he had invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to visit and would find a way for him to do so without being arrested under a warrant by the ICC. I think it's a completely absurd idea that an Israeli Prime Minister cannot visit the Federal Republic of Germany. Merz said at a press conference a day after his Conservatives won the largest share of the vote in the national election. So you can see here
Well,
that
George, the easiest way, if this is how Mr. Merz thinks about it, then Germany should withdraw from the ICC.
as Hungary has done, yes,
That's how it's done.
right.
You found your way.
That's right. And then Merz said he had told Netanyahu by phone, quote, we would find ways and means for him to visit Germany and leave again without being arrested. Netanyahu's office said that the Israeli leader had congratulated Merz. It also said Merz had told Netanyahu he would invite him to Germany in defiance of the scandalous International Criminal Court decision to label the prime minister as a war criminal. So he now calls that a scandalous decision. So again, then what are you doing being a member of a court that issues scandalous decisions? So I mean, this is pretty much what Orbán said. I mean, there's no difference here. But somehow when Orbán does it, you get all this condemnation, but it's exactly the same. And now here's the France. This is what France said back in November at the time that the arrest warrants were issued. Here, France points to Netanyahu immunity from ICC war crimes warrant. France's foreign minister signaled that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu enjoys immunity from arrest despite an ICC warrant against him for alleged war crimes. This actually is correct. I mean, that's a correct interpretation, except that these creatures constantly saying no one is above the law, no one is immune, which is, and as we'll come to it, that's exactly the position they took with Putin. But somehow when it comes to they say correctly that yeah, he has immunity, that we don't have to just simply blindly accept ICC arrest warrants.
You don't have to accept because there is an exception.
There's an exception, exactly. That's right. And I mean, so this is, it's in the Rome Statute. It's Article 98 in the Rome Statute. And here it says, in a carefully worded statement, the ministry said it would respect international justice obligations while noting that immunity rules protect leaders of states that are not ICC members, such as Israel. A state cannot be held to act in a way that is incompatible with its obligations in terms of international law with regard to immunities granted to states which are not party to the ICC, the foreign minister said. Such immunities apply to Prime Minister Netanyahu and other ministers in question and must be taken into consideration should the ICC ask us to arrest them and hand them over. So that's the French
Yeah,
position.
Russia
But
is
I never
not.
said exactly. That's exactly
But
right.
Russia is not part of the ICC, but
That's
Putin would be arrested. So
Putin. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
not
Maybe I'm
only.
not smart enough. I don't understand
No,
this.
that's right. That's exactly right. And let's remember when Putin was planning on visiting South Africa for the BRICS summit, there was enormous amount of pressure that was applied, international pressure, not just domestic pressure, international pressure. South Africa, as a signatory of the Rome Statute, must arrest Putin. But there's a lot of pressure that came on South Africa, coming from France and all the rest, even though Russia is no more a member of the ICC than Israel is. And then it says that Prime Minister Michel Barnier previously stated that France would rigorously apply its obligation regarding the ICC warrant. And then here we have, however, the ministry acknowledged that Article 98 of the statute permits exceptions for diplomatic immunity for leaders of non-member states, creating a potential conflict. And then we have the foreign minister indicate that certain state leaders may be protected from ICC
Well, now they're
prosecution.
saying it's certain state leaders.
Yes, exactly. And then here is this Article 98. It says the court may not proceed with a request for surrender or assistance which would require the requested state to act inconsistently with its obligations under international law with respect to the state or diplomatic immunity of a person or property of a third state, which is that's the state of Israel or Russia, unless the court can first obtain the cooperation of that third state for the waiver of the immunity. So basically, what it's saying is that unless Israel or Russia, basically accept the jurisdiction of the ICC. In other words, they say that they're willing to cooperate with the ICC. Then you cannot arrest the leader of that state. So in other words, if it acts inconsistently with its obligation under international law with respect to the state or diplomatic immunity of a personal property of a third state, unless the court can first obtain the cooperation of that third state for the waiver of the immunity. So in other words, Russia or Israel have to accept a waiver of the immunity. The court may not proceed with a request for surrender, which would require the requested state to act inconsistently with its obligations under international agreements, pursuant to which the consent of a sending state is required to surrender a person to the state of the court, unless the court can first obtain the cooperation of the sending state for the giving of consent for the surrender. That's it. There's the immunity. But they pretended all the time with the case of Putin that this didn't exist. Suddenly they remember Article 98 when it came to Netanyahu. And then
And
here,
this, everyone, this is the very foundation of the distrust and disgust with the ICC,
yes,
because it's completely arbitrary. It has no legal standing in
no,
international law at all. So it's just very arbitrary.
it's completely arbitrary. It was always a mechanism during the glory days of the 90s. They was just to use this against others. And the Americans, the Americans were very clever because, and they did it very craftily because they were actually involved in the drafting of the statute, very, very actively involved, and pretended to the world that they were going to take part in this. And, oh, yeah, the Americans are really going to take part in this. Anyone with any common sense knew there's no way the Americans are going to accept the jurisdiction of some international body over Americans. So they went along with this, and then Clinton, duly signed the Rome Statute, but he never presented it to the Senate for ratification because he knew perfectly well the Senate was never going to ratify it. And then 2 years later, George W. Bush just simply withdrew with the signature altogether, and then passed the Hague Invasion Act. That anyone who tries to arrest an American, you're gonna hear from us. We're gonna absolutely invade the Hague and liberate any American from captivity. But it was a very cunning maneuver to pretend that America was going to, so the human rights brigade, oh, look, the Americans are really taking this very seriously. Um, and then here's the Guardian. France says Netanyahu is immune from ICC warrant as Israel is not a member of the court. And then claim comes after Paris signal it would fulfill obligations as signature to Rome statute after arrest warrants are issued. Again, this is the fraud that they signaled that they would fulfill it. Everyone knew, of course, they're not going to fulfill it. And again, the French government has claimed that Netanyahu has immunity from arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. The claim comes after blah blah, and then he goes on. The French foreign minister appeared to change his tone and claim Netanyahu had immunity because Israel was not a signatory to the statute. A state cannot be held in any way that to act in a way that is incompatible with its obligation in terms of international law with regard to immunities granted to states which are not a party to the ICC. Such immunities apply to Prime Minister Netanyahu and other ministers in question and must be taken into consideration should the ICC ask us to arrest them and hand them over. In other words, Netanyahu is welcome to come to Paris and
Yeah, well, how many times, how many people did a deep dive on an African leader? Oh no, no, he's a head of state. He's not a member of the ICC. You can bet your bottom dollar,
all right.
everyone, that said African leader would be arrested in a heartbeat.
That's right. And when South Africa, that was like the president of Sudan, and South Africa didn't arrest him. Everyone attacked South Africa. You were supposed to, Omar. His name is Omar. He was indicted for genocide. You have to arrest him. South Africa didn't arrest him, and of course he was condemned. But what happened to the whole immunity issue in his case? And then it goes on, blah blah. It says the ICC ruled in 2019 that Article 98 was not a fountain of immunity, but rather a procedural rule that guided how the court should ask.
What
No
in the
one
world
cares
is
what the ICC
what is
ruled.
the fountain of immunity?
Exactly. It's there.
It sounds pretty, but what?
Yes, I don't know. Yeah, fountain of immunity. It sounds like fountain, just keeps pouring out, more immunity. Give me immunity. And then Galland, France says Netanyahu, Galland have immunity from ICC charges as ICE won't arrest them. And again, this is Times of Israel. And now here, you remember when Putin visited Mongolia? Visited Mongolia. Now, Mongolia is a party to the Rome Statute. And here's the headline, the AFP, EU regrets Mongolia didn't arrest Putin. The European Union on Tuesday criticized Mongolia for failing to enforce an international criminal court arrest warrant against Russian President Vladimir Putin during his visit.
But what about Article 98?
Exactly. What about Article 98? Yeah. Quote, the EU regrets that Mongolia, a state party to the Rome Statute of the ICC, did not comply with its obligations under the statute to execute the arrest warrant, an EU spokesperson said in a statement. So again, as you ask, what about Article 98? And then here's a briefing. This is I think the French Foreign Ministry. Question: regarding Vladimir Putin's visit to Mongolia this week, what is the attitude of France, a member state of the ICC, regarding the possibility of this visit taking place without arrests? Does the doctrine of immunity of sitting heads of state apply? Is it better for the Russian president to travel, as this might help negotiate an end to Russia's war against Ukraine? So this is the question. Answer: each state party to the Rome Statute has an obligation to cooperate with the ICC and to execute arrest warrants issued by it in accordance with the relevant provisions of the Rome Statute. This is the French Foreign Ministry. True to its long-standing commitment to fighting impunity, France will continue to support the essential work of international justice to ensure that those responsible for all crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine are held accountable. It fully supports the ICC as well as the Ukrainian courts that contribute to this objective. So, but again, I mean, you have to, but I thought, what about Article 98? I mean, it's there, it's in black and white. But no, 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 you got to execute that warrant. And that's this, of course, they did that with South Africa.
Well,
They
this is, this is like the way the U.S. Constitution is being treated in the United States. I mean, there's freedom of speech, but then there's
right,
freedom of speech.
right,
Okay, I
right,
mean, how these people are so arbitrary
right,
and so hypocritical.
right,
Okay,
right,
you didn't hear anything about Article 98 when Putin travels, but
right.
one has to wonder, George, the cynic in me was this article written exclusively with the thought of protecting Israeli leaders? One has to wonder.
Well, it certainly wasn't written in order to protect Russian leaders. I mean, you could say that. That's right. But yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, they knew this, that, well, what's going to happen when the issue is going to come up is, are you going to arrest somebody who's not a party to the statute? And so they said, oh, and I mean, obviously Israel was going to be that, but they wouldn't have had any carve out where matter of Russia or China, but there is a carve out for Israel. Anyway, here is Reuters. France on ICC arrest warrant for Putin. No one should escape justice. The French government said on Friday that no one should escape justice as it reacted to the International Criminal Court's decision to issue an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin. No one responsible for crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine, regardless of their status, should escape justice, said the French Foreign Affairs Ministry on its Twitter account. So, impunity. So there's no impunity. No one escapes justice. Amazing how they suddenly remember Article 98. Netanyahu, they suddenly remember this. We're talking about
Well,
these are
George, in all honesty, I wasn't aware of that peculiar article. Like I said, it seems to be something that was kept close to the vest. It didn't matter at the time, but now they see how they can apply it.
well,
It seems to me custom made. I'm sorry.
but the thing is, the reason is the media, as usual, do this terrible job, and they just flatly report, oh, well, if you're a signature of the Rome Statute, you have to arrest. If there's an arrest warrant, that's it. You have no choice. You have to do it. And no, that is not what the Rome Statute says. And there it is. It's there. It's an important article. It's there. So, but the media constantly repeat and repeat and repeat this. Oh well, South Africa really has no choice. It has to arrest Putin.
It's under the file of Ukraine gave up its nukes.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
Budapest
Just
Memorandum,
exactly.
security for Ukraine.
Right.
Okay, it's in the same file.
It is in the
Okay.
same file. Exactly. That's right. You just keep repeating this, and no one bothers to look it up. Well,
Article 5 of the NATO of the
that's
NATO
Article
Treaty.
5. Oh, yeah, you're absolutely obliged to go to war on a NATO state's behalf. Yeah, that's right. Oh, Ukraine receives security guarantees in return for giving up its nuclear weapons. I mean, they do this without anyone ever bothering to check this. So it's like, oh, well, that's according to Rome Statute. That's it. You have no no choice. But of course, and these governments repeat this, except when they suddenly realize, hey, are you really going to do this? Are you going to? Oh yeah. Oh, this thing called Article 98. Yeah. Oh, you suddenly remembered. You didn't remember it when the subject was South Africa and Mongolia. Now suddenly you remembered about Article 98.
But it still won't apply with Putin, of
No,
course.
that's right. No, exactly. But the good news is that our friend Kaja Kallas was speaking this week, and she was on her favorite subject, which was justice for Russia's heinous crimes in Ukraine. So in Europe, she was speaking at the European Parliament, and she was addressing about, we need to address justice for Russia.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw the clip, but she got a real dressing down by one of the members of parliament. The guy was standing right in front of her, and he just pulverized her over Gaza. Just pulverized her. She was there. All the blood had drained from her head. She looked like a corpse.
Yeah, no, actually, I didn't see that. But it's interesting because we'll come to that she was in Tel Aviv the other day.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And so she addressing the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Kallas said Russian war crimes in Ukraine could not be denied, highlighting civilian killings in Bucha 3 years ago. She said the evidence was overwhelming. We
No,
know,
it's not
of
overwhelming.
course, it isn't.
Russia at the United Nations Security Council asked the international community, pointing right at Ukraine, please release the names of the people
Right,
at least. Okay.
right,
What forensic evidence? Please release it to the public.
right,
To the public.
right.
No, no.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. We know exactly who the perpetrators are, she said. With the technology we have at our fingertips today, impunity for war crimes is frankly impossible so long as we put the work into it. And then she said the scale of war crimes committed in Ukraine is simply beyond belief. Russia's campaign against human life and dignity truly knows no limits. We also see this in reports of enforced disappearances, torture, extrajudicial,
Yeah, but
blah, blah.
that's what the Ukrainian security forces are doing to their own people.
Yeah, that's right. Um, And then, as she said, the EU would continue to pursue justice for the victims of Russian atrocities. That's right. And then
Oh, the children's story again.
that's right,
Great.
exactly.
This,
Um,
she really needs to keep up with the times, okay? The US government has dropped that
right.
complete because it's bogus.
That's right, exactly. Um, and then she said that most criminal cases, around 170,000, have already been opened. 170,000. And will be investigated and prosecuted by Ukrainian authorities with the support of the EU. And for the specific crime of aggression, the EU is leading the work on the establishment of a special tribunal. So she has to do that because, of course, the ICC cannot address the issue of aggression. So she has to, the EU will deal with it. I mean, all this is, of course, done with a view to ensure that there can be no settlement in Ukraine because, hey, we're planning on holding these tribunals and
Yeah, but she should be reminded that Russia is doing exactly the same thing, having a tribunal of
right,
trials, particularly of the perpetrators that killed civilians in the Donbass from
right,
2014 to 2022.
right.
So that's ongoing.
That's right. She added that the recovery for Ukraine would come not only through reconstruction, but through the pursuit of justice and accountability for the heinous crimes committed by Russia.
Yeah, well, she
Um,
really likes to get ahead of her skis,
yes,
doesn't
she
she?
does. And then here she is in Tel Aviv.
Oh, okay.
And then she says, unfortunately, my visit comes at a difficult time. The breakdown of ceasefire has caused an appalling loss of life. This morning, I also met with the families of the hostages, and
It's like the ceasefire.
it just broke down. Broke.
It just broke. It just broke down.
That's right.
It just doesn't work.
That's right.
Can someone give an aspirin to Mr. Ceasefire? Maybe
That's right.
resuscitation, maybe some adrenaline.
That's right.
God, this passive voice stuff is maddening.
That's right. Yeah. And this morning, I met the families of the hostages, and listening to the stories is always very hard. I again condemn strongly Hamas's violence. It is never easy to meet the families who have lost loved ones or do not know the fate of their loved ones. And then
She did visit Gaza, though, right?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't
I
remember
don't
that.
think so. Maybe not.
Um,
Maybe the West Bank. No.
I don't remember that. The European Union stands in solidarity with Israel and its people following the horrible attacks of October the 7th, 2023. I reiterate now what I said this morning. Resuming negotiations is the only feasible way to end all the suffering on all sides. But there had been negotiations, but
Yeah, and the Israelis unilaterally broke the ceasefire and
exactly.
refused to go to the second stage. So is she addressing her concerns to the right people?
No, I don't. I'm not sure she is. And then Mr. Saar, as I underlined when we met a month ago, the security of Israel is extremely important to the European Union. That's all that matters, like the security of Israel. Israelis must be able to feel safe in their own homes Israel has a right of self-defense against terror attacks, whether from Hamas, the Houthis, or Hezbollah. So here she's spouting entire kind of Israeli government propaganda, the kind that you get spouted in Washington. I mean, this is exactly the same mindless stuff about Israelis must be able to feel safe in their own homes because that's all that matters. It has the right of self-defense. It's the only thing that matters. And Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, they're all the same.
It just reinforces my sense that she has a brain made of cork.
Yes.
Okay. There's no thinking here.
No.
This is just, stream of consciousness propaganda. That's all this is.
That's right. However, military actions must be proportionate. Israeli strikes into Syria and Lebanon risk further escalation. That's what it's risk further escalation. And then I think she goes on. And finally, on Iran, we agree the immense threat Iran poses to the region and global stability. Iran is a threat, also supporting Russia's war in Ukraine. Iran must never be allowed to acquire or build a nuclear weapon, and the EU supports all diplomatic efforts to that effect. Here she's going even beyond the EU position, because I don't think EU actually says that Iran poses a threat to the region and global stability. I mean, maybe that's what they say. I mean, that's what the Americans say, but that's not quite the EU position.
Well,
so she's gone a little beyond that.
Yeah, but this is a really good case study here, something that you and I have talked about for years now, is that when you look at the elite capture that Washington has been able to achieve,
Right.
I mean, these individuals, Kallas, for example, she's not speaking for Estonia. She's not even speaking for the European Union.
Right.
And we've seen this time and time again, where she doesn't get her cues from the member states of the EU. She gets her cues from Washington.
That's right. That's exactly right. Because here she's just repeating this, must never be allowed to acquire or build a nuclear weapon, and the EU supports all diplomatic efforts to that effect. But
when the nuclear deal, part of the nuclear deal, when Trump withdrew from it, you and I remember this show. The Europeans will continue it. We'll make sure that it comes to fruition and all that. It was all BS. They did nothing.
They did nothing. Exactly. They didn't do anything. Particularly as everyone knew when they signed the JCPOA that America was going to walk away. That's why they put that provision into that agreement, that should anyone walk away, nonetheless, we will maintain basically the lifting of the sanctions. In other words, that Iran will still be able to sell its oil. And that never happened. I mean, so having first planned for this, envisage, the Americans, we know they're going to walk away from this, at some point, so therefore we need to make sure that there's a mechanism in place that Iran will still be able to sell its oil. Nope, never happened.
These are such good examples. I think that a lot of people in the West that are even have a cursory interest in these issues, because most people don't, George, let's be honest. But this shows just how isolated the West has become. I mean, it is a suffocating echo chamber. They all say the same thing. They're all boilerplate, meaningless phrases. Right. Okay. The global South, the global majority, they don't look at Iran this way at all. They don't look at Russia this way at all. Right. And they have, at the very least, suspicions, and maybe go further, even kind of hatred for the Europeans, because they keep acting like colonial powers. Right. 5, 6, 7 decades, 8 decades after formal colonialism came to an end. But the mentality is still there. If you're dark, if you're black or you're brown, there's a different set of rules for you, okay? And Europe is virtuous because they're European. It doesn't wash. It doesn't.
No, that's right. The ICC, of course, they set this up with a view, of course, to using the ICC against the powers, the non-Europeans. Everyone knew that obviously they were never going to be used against the Europeans. The Russians signed on to the ICC, and I should say Russia signed on to the ICC and maintained its membership, although it never ratified the Rome Statute, but it remained as a signatory of the Rome Statute really up until 2016. Should have walked away a long time ago, because the thrust of the ICC was always obvious. Of course, at some point they were going to turn on Russia. I mean, that was just that's a given. I mean, of course they were going to turn.
And George, let's be very frank here. It took the Russians a long time to wake up to these things. Okay, they put way too much faith into the Rome Statute. They put way too much faith in the OSCE. All these organizations. Okay. Right. And then finally they realized, they're full paid members, but they're not treated as full members.
No.
It took a long time for that to happen.
It took a very long time, and not really until it was thrust right on their face in 2016, when essentially the ICC said we regard Crimea as essentially under foreign occupation. At that moment, they find, okay, we're withdrawing our signature from the Rome Statute. Should have done a long time earlier.
Say that again. The ICC determined that
the ICC,
Crimea was under. On what legal standing do they have to make that assessment?
What had happened is, I think Ukraine had accepted jurisdiction of the ICC starting from 2014. And then the ICC, it declared that, we consider Crimea under foreign occupation, and that there's a good chance that war crimes had been committed in Ukraine.
And plus, Ukraine only has they have a special cutout. They're only partially members.
Only starting from 2014. That's why they did it. Because they also were not.
With that expressive purpose.
With that exactly. That's why they did it and said, we accept jurisdiction starting from 2014. And then, of course, that's the one the ICC rules. We consider Crimea under foreign occupation, and it's quite likely that war crimes have been committed. And that was the moment at which Russia withdrew its signature. Should have happened a long time ago. I mean, it was obvious that this is what the ICC was going to do.
I think that the ICC has to live up to what it claims to be, or just shut itself down. I mean, how much time do we have to waste on this, George? George and I, think about it. We only talk about the ICC is because it is so hypocritical and illogical and inconsistent. That's the only time we ever talk about it.
That's right. But that's because the ICC is something that it gets dusted down whenever the West suddenly wants to pose and preen and posture as the avatar of human rights, of ending impunity, of punishing war criminals, of holding leaders to account. And suddenly we're supposed to believe in this absolute nonsense that this is what the Western powers believe. But they only believe it whenever it's convenient for them to pretend to believe it. We got to get Gaddafi. We have to absolutely Gaddafi must face justice. Before that used to be Slobodan Milosevic must face justice.
With Gaddafi, why don't we just introduce a RICO element to the ICC? Then you can go after Sarkozy, okay? I mean, really. Again, we started out by saying this institution has no legal standing at all. It's a pure invention of the West. But it sounds like, it sounds like it's run by the UN or something.
That's exactly
that's what they want you to think.
That's exactly what they do.
And they'll never explain to you its origins, what its purpose was. They'll never give you the background. It's just, it's there.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
In its passive voice, it's just there.
That's right. That's it. And that's why they did. They made it. Its headquarters will be in The Hague. It was like, The Hague. Well, that's where all the international justice, all the courts are in The Hague. The ICJ, the World Court, is in The Hague. The permanent arbitration.
And they wear the wigs and stuff.
Yeah, all that. It's always in The Hague.
Robes.
Exactly. The ICTY and the Rwanda Tribunal, they're also in The Hague. You always see them in The Hague. And most people just don't know what the difference between all these things. They all sound very similar. They're meeting out.
I bet they have a real bang-up buffet there too.
They live. That's right. They live very, very nicely, and they wear these very nice robes. And it's very important that they have these robes, And then some, particularly for the British barristers, the British are very big on this. The British barristers, they wear their wigs just to show how, how they really love this
No,
international justice.
that's a legitimizing tool. That's all that is.
Exactly, but that's they like wearing these wigs, just to show how very seriously they take this. The British, incidentally, also on Netanyahu, were very ambiguous as to whether they ever intended to arrest him. Even as they're talking about we must end impunity, end impunity. So this happened all the time, but because Orban was the one who just made it explicit and said, "Well, that's it. I mean, I don't care about any of this. Which I'm moving to withdraw, and that'll take about a year. Maybe it might be longer. I don't know. If Orban stays in power, I think they probably will withdraw. But he may lose the next election. In which case, I think Hungary probably will withdraw its withdrawal, which could certainly happen.
And they'll probably put him in prison. Seriously, folks.
Oh yeah, no question. I mean that's still on the cards because once you lose power, boom, absolutely they're going to come after you just like they came after Trump, and you don't really have any means to defend yourself. So that could all happen. One other, and remember the Philippines. The Philippines was one of the few states that was a signatory of the Rome Statute, had ratified it, but then had withdrawn from the ICC. But that didn't help Duterte, the president, because he was arrested, kidnapped, bundled off to The Hague, even though the Philippines was no longer even a member of the ICC at that stage. So, but you were back then, and so now,
it has actually nothing to do with the ICC, and it has a lot to do with really petty family politics in the Philippines, and they just wanted to get rid of him. Okay, this is a blood feud going on. Okay,
no, that I think is another aspect of all of this, the international justice racket, is that it provides fuel for all kinds of internal disputes and saying, well, this is a pretty good way of getting rid of my political opponent. I'm just going to enforce the arrest warrant from some international body, bung him straight on a plane, boom, gone, bye-bye. So it's very short-sighted and contemptible, but no question that, a lot of countries play this kind of domestic politics.
Yeah. It's such an institution in ill repute, and what it does is what is the ultimate message? There is impunity for some. Okay,
yes.
That's all it tells you. Okay,
yep.
And when you put Israel and Russia side by side, one gets a free pass, the other one doesn't. Okay,
that's right.
Based on the same standards.
Exactly. Suddenly. Everyone remembers Article 98, well, and all the time when all that pressure was applied against South Africa, over and over again against South Africa. You have to enforce this arrest warrant, and particularly the Europeans who are saying, if you want to enjoy good economic relations with us, you don't want to.
Well, I think that's a moot point now. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to have good economic relations with anybody right now until we see where all the dust settles in all of this here. I think a lot of pain is going to be coming to working people. I really, really do, because just pass on the cost, okay? And and then things get competitive in each sector. Sector rivals will go after each other, knock a few of them out, and then you have a monopoly. Yay! Okay. Okay, that's a topic for another, and George and I will be talking about that. Okay. But when it comes to international law, it's dead.
Yep.
It's just, and this is something, and I think it came from a right place, obviously. International law the idea of it came from the West. One of the important lessons learned from the Second World War. And 80 years later, George, it's a dead letter. It's a dead letter.
Right. No, exactly. The problem was that it was always a kind of a one-sided. Even when they went to Nuremberg, everyone knew this is pretty much one-sided. I mean, it was
Yeah.
basically the victors were putting the vanquished on trial. But because, no one had very much sympathy for the Nazis, you said, okay, well, that's fine. But nonetheless, the enterprise was already very dubious precisely because it was applied in a one-sided way. And there hasn't been very much progress since then. It's always being applied in a one-sided way. It's always being applied by those who are on top, and they use it in order to punish their
Well,
victims and to declare
and
that they are the
also,
ones who are the war criminals.
if you look at the tribunals against the Nazis and the Japanese, one thing, and if this knowledge had been available to the perpetrators of crimes, if you can just hold out, the longer you can hold out, the better chance you're going to get away with it.
Right,
Okay,
right.
because once you get a certain number, because this is this kind of cathartic relief.
Right.
We punish the bad guy. Well, there were a lot of bad guys there.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't run by 12 people or 30
Right, right.
people. It
No,
was
that's right. That's exactly what they did. I mean, they basically they had the first trials, and these were the top Nazis who were executed. But then after a while, basically the trials started running out, and then even those who were put in prison, they were released pretty quickly. You put in prison 12 years, you get released after three.
Oh, and we're creating this alliance called NATO. Do you
Exactly.
have any
That,
extra
yeah.
German general? Yeah, we got a few. Okay,
Right.
just bring them in.
Yeah, yeah, no, that was it. So they and then everyone just sort of forgot all about that, and I really, no one really missed it because no one really thought, well, this is fair because after all, if it was just war crimes, eh, everyone committed war crimes. I mean, like bombing cities, targeting civilians. I
Right,
mean,
that's
everyone was
right.
doing that. So, but so no one was terribly unhappy that these war crimes trials ended until they were revived in the 90s during the heyday of Western dominance.
Yeah, and plus it is something uh, therapeutic in a kind of bizarre way where you can put a face to evil. That's evil,
Right.
okay? But I mean, the bombing of Dresden was evil, but we
Was
don't put a
exactly
face on that.
That's right. That all of that, and of course,
Okay.
the dropping of the atomic bomb
With bomb.
was
We don't.
no question a war crime.
Who dropped the bomb? Everyone. I think if George and I think long enough, we'll probably remember the guy's name. But the point is, it's not top of mind.
It's not top of mind, but pretty much a war crime, civilians, and done with
Civilians,
a view to compel a surrender because of a terror against civilians. Classic war
and
crime.
they didn't surrender because of
No,
it.
no, they did not. They did. They
So it
did.
didn't work.
It didn't work. That's again the problem with that, terrorizing civilians. That actually doesn't really work. And we saying that, in the case of Gaza again, it isn't really working. Israel isn't achieving its ends just because it's killing a lot of civilians. That's never going to succeed. It never has succeeded. But nonetheless, states continually go back to that tactic and thinking that they're going to get results by terror bombing of civilians. It's never worked.
That's why you can, as I speak right now, at least we have winter revisited us in the last 24 hours. Unbelievably, there's snow on the ground, but you can be sitting in a cafe in Kiev. You don't have to fear being
All right.
annihilated in a civilian venue. Okay.
Right.
As George has said, it doesn't generate dividends for you in fighting. Fighting a war is you destroy the other side's
It
military.
has
That's how
you
you
have to
win.
target the military capability, and then that's when you win. You've destroyed their military capability. Terror attacks of civilians. It didn't do anything. I mean, it's like Americans the terror bombing of Tokyo, just horrific. I mean, and all directed civilians. That didn't affect the Japanese leadership one bit. I mean, they didn't say, "Oh God, look what they've done to Tokyo. It's all up in flame. We need to surrender." They never thought that. Okay, well, that's the way it goes.
Well, and
That's
from what we understand, and I'm on thin ice here, but the population wasn't moved either.
no,
It just reinsures resolve. I mean, we saw that in Germany.
yeah, no,
Okay, where was the movement, popular movement
no,
to
no.
overthrow the Nazis? It wasn't there.
No, 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 exactly, exactly. It just always the result is it makes everyone stubborn and determined to stay the course. It never leads to surrender. But continue, every war, states are always tempted to think that this is the way we're going to achieve quick results, and it never works. And again, Israel is doing exactly the same thing, and it doesn't do it. It's because they will not surrender. People will. You can kill women and children, you can burn buildings or whatever. It still doesn't compel surrender.
Yeah. It's a very a strange peculiarity of the human condition is that the U.S. is always looking for the next Hitler. Okay, again, personifying. It's a personification.
Right.
Okay, and then of course anyone that doesn't like what Israel's doing, they're another Hitler, or
Right.
Hitler sympathizer, or anti-Semite. Okay.
Right.
Well, I don't know, was it the Kingdom of Heaven film it was made about? It was about the Crusades and how Salah ad-Din regained control of Jerusalem. The film is fantastic. I really liked the film, but it's completely false. It's not based in history at all. Okay, but it's a great film.
Right.
But I can remember watching it, and they had these tall walls, and I guess back then they had figured out this boiling tar. And they would have these huge vats and they'd pour it down, and the guys that were climbing up, they're all burned and covered. And I was watching that film and I just thought, that was like 800, 900 years ago. And the human condition has learned nothing. We just keep killing each other.
Right. It's very true.
We haven't made any progress at all. As a species, we are really stunted.
I think it's an interesting aspect that the human mind has not progressed. Man's control over nature has made stunning progress. I mean, what we've done with science, understanding nature, using nature to generate prosperity and a much higher standard of life, supporting a large population. But in terms of the human condition, the human mind, that hasn't changed. There's been no progress over thousands of years, because humans are exactly the same place as they were.
But the indictment is that we should have learned something.
Right.
Okay. I mean, if if you're a Neanderthal man, people. I always find it really curious. Well, you see that the kind of the evolution of the human being. They go from like the ape and all of that.
Right.
Well, you have to remember that some of those men, prototype men, they existed at the same time.
Right.
And they killed each other to get rid. You didn't go from this guy to this guy. No, this guy killed all of these guys. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. But humans have become very good at developing ever more sophisticated weapons. So they use their knowledge about nature and how to control and manipulate nature to create ever more deadly weapons. But they create weapons precisely because the nature of human conflict, the ability of humans to come to agreement and understanding, that hasn't changed very much.
Well, and sometimes it's uneven. I mean, when you look at how the West, with amazing speed, when you think about it, conquered the known world. Okay, so we have 1492. I'll just take that date. Okay. But Europe had one of the reasons why the Europeans were technologically efficient. It's not because Europeans are smarter. No, it has nothing to do with that. The Europeans were good at killing each other. And just for what George is saying there, they developed more and more intense ways to kill each other. And then they exported it. He said, now we can do this. It's not like the Franks were fighting the Germans. Okay, they had come to a settlement, but they had built up this technology.
But that took some doing. I mean, the scientific method.
In a way, what I'm just saying is that human endeavor,
right, exactly,
went not into the realm of spiritual or communal. It was like, how can we kill even more efficiently? And after the European bloodbaths of centuries, they decided, let's take this on the road.
Right. Right now, but you have to say I mean, developing the scientific method was something. I mean, everyone had to immune. I mean,
But
it was
why did they do it?
well, why obviously, yeah, it helped,
It helped. Okay, it
it
wasn't the
helps to
only
control
thing.
nature, but it also does a lot of other things. I mean, I mean, yes, we learn how to kill one another more efficient, but it also did other things, lighting streets and making life much easier, and all the other things that science accomplished. And that was a Western achievement. I mean, obviously others other learned it, but that the scientific method, the scientific revolution, I mean, that did take place in the West, and obviously it has has obviously beneficial effects. I mean, like
Well,
longevity
I mean,
and
I
everything,
saw
but it has negative effects as well,
Leonardo
as
da
with science and
Vinci.
technology.
Take Leonardo da Vinci. I saw an exhibition here of his thoughts and works and all that. I had no idea how much he was involved in developing weapons. I mean, I mean, he was a brilliant mind. He had a brilliant mind, but he wasn't all this artsy fartsy type guy that we remember him today. This guy was like, the wheels with spikes and stuff like that. It was just like, whoa! I didn't know he came up with that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's right. But there's a little more than that. I mean, I think you have to say
Okay. I'm not
scientific.
trying to
I mean,
overstate. I'm
some.
not trying to overstate
Yeah,
my
that's
case,
right. I mean,
but the military
the
prowess.
availability, but yeah, definitely led to great military prowess. But it's not like everyone else wasn't committing
Oh yeah, well the
crimes
Chinese were
against
working
others.
hard. The Chinese, gunpowder, all kinds of
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
they did all that.
But what I'm just saying is that it's really quite remarkable how the western tip of Asia was able to conquer most of the known world relatively quickly. That
Yes.
is really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we live with it to this day, everyone.
Right, right. No, that's
All right,
absolutely.
we went a little far afield here. Sorry. It's what happens when George and I talk at great length. Um, but yeah, this nonsense, this circus around the ICC just is another indicator to me that international law is dead because it's dead if you allow impunity, it's dead if you make exceptions. Then don't have it.
No, I
Just
think
stop
I
it.
think that's really where it should be. I don't I see nothing beneficial in this
I agree.
international law enterprise. So, and when you introduce it, bad things are going to happen. You know that there's no good faith in it, and that therefore you're just using this for wholly bad, inappropriate ends, and therefore we should just simply absolutely always stay away from it.
Yeah. All right, everyone. A long treatise today on international law and the human condition. This is The Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. This is Sunday. With the grace of God, God wills that George and I will attempt still another live stream tomorrow. We did recognize last week the counter across the platforms was working except for YouTube. I think YouTube just doesn't like us.
No,
Okay,
no,
so
that's yes, yeah, yeah,
but the other ones there. So tell a friend. You got a little bit of time. Tell a
exactly,
friend.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
and come with questions for tomorrow. Anything you want to ask us, anything you want us to discuss, please. Homework between now and then. Come up with some good stimulating subjects that we can talk about. So we always enjoy answering questions. We always enjoy discoursing. So please join us tomorrow and come up with all sorts of what is that?
Oh, it's one of my favorite pens.
That's a big pen. That's one big
I
pen.
have a lot. I have a lot of big pens. Hang on. Take a look at this one. This will knock your socks off. This is the Da Vinci pen.
Oh, oh.
It's got a little bit of like a balcony there.
Oh.
What's really cool is that Mont Blanc has the star.
Mhm.
It's the cap of Mont Blanc
Mhm.
in Europe, but it has a mirror in here that reflects it. It's really, really cool. So this is what I collect. This is what I'd like to do.
Hmm.
I love pens. Okay.
That's nice and very old-fashioned. Nobody really
Yes, yeah.
uses pens anymore.
Who was it I had on my program? I had Nikolai Petrov, and I referred to myself as the Luddite in Moscow because I use fountain pens, I use paper, um, I take notes. I don't like working on a computer. Only emails and texts. Okay, but
Right.
writing I put on paper. Okay. I have a huge collection of different inks. I love ink as well. Beautiful paper, which is very expensive, by the way, because almost all paper is recycled now, almost all of it. And want to get really quality paper for a fountain pen, it's pricey. And a lot of it comes from Japan, by the way.
Hmm. Yeah, okay. And so those pens, what do they have? They have a refill, a cartridge refill. What? How do?
This pen here, for example, what you do is it has the function is you roll this back, it opens it, and whatever is in the chamber comes out. And then when it's out, you screw it back in and it sucks it back up. Okay.
Hmm, hmm.
Okay. So it's very, very nice. It's not cheap, obviously. That's how most of them are. Okay. And there's a fanatical group of pen collectors, particularly of Mont Blanc. I only collect Mont Blanc only. Well, I could spend a lot of time doing it. What? Okay. Let's see here. While we're here, this is the Joseph the First pen, very regal.
Hmm. It's kind of big. I mean, is it
Oh, I
comfortable?
like it.
Is it comfortable
I like.
writing with something so big?
Well, this is called posting. You can't. A lot of their pens you can't post. Okay,
Uh-huh.
I mean you could write with it like this, but it would be really wobbly and will fall off, and you don't want to scratch it. But this just by itself, and I have big hands, so that's enough to write with. Okay, because this is metal. The other ones, it's like for example, let's see what's the standard one that everybody knows, which everybody outside of the pen world calls it the diplomat. Where is it? Yeah. Nope, not that one. Yeah. This is, everybody knows this pen. This is called a 149 Meisterstück, master, masterpiece. And it's very standard.
Yeah, that's the and that brings back memories. A
Yep,
nib, the
yep.
nib. Yeah. Yeah.
It's called a 149 Meisterstück, but colloquially people call it the diplomat pen. And this is really nice to hold, really nice to hold. And it does post if you want. I don't post because if you do it too much, you'll end up leaving a line there, and I don't like that. Okay, it ends up looking like a watermark. So again, this is big enough to hold. And then if you like small pens, this is cool. This was the pen they came out with in the early 1920s and reintroduced it 2 years ago.
Hmm.
It doesn't clip, so you can hold it in your hand all day. You don't even feel it, and it's fun to hold.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And this is different from other pens. It has a cartridge,
Okay.
which I actually refill. I use a syringe and I fill it up because why waste the cartridge? Okay, if it still works, I fill it up with ink.
Hmm.
You never know when a sanction will hit you. Okay.
All right. Well, that was an interesting discourse on pens, and I think the dogs are probably thinking, yeah, well, that's very, very
Oh, there he
interesting.
goes again. He's talking about pens. They go to
Yeah,
sleep.
yeah, pens. Yeah, that's fantastic. But you're changing the subject, where the real subject is the tip jar, and pens are just not going to cut it. You know, paper, coins. crypto, that cuts it. And so, if you have anything in the, to contribute to the tip jar, please, everything in it, it's all going to the dogs anyway, nothing for us. The dogs take everything, and they feel that they're entitled to it. So, we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, we'll keep the dogs happy for maybe a little while longer. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.